So today I'm going to talk about database culture. And more specifically, I'm going to talk about one particular arts practice produced by database culture, remix. So first, what do I mean when I say database culture? Well, I'll get into more detail in later lectures, but for now, let's just say that database culture is culture that has arisen from the storage of digital information in an organized and structured manner. In other words, I'm talking about internet culture, where information in a wide variety of formats is stored across a massive network and made accessible at any time. What is a remix? Well, I could tell you a definition, but in keeping with the subject matter, I thought I'd use other sources to make my point. So, here is Kirby Ferguson from the video series Everything is a Remix, with a succinct and useful definition.
Remix. To combine or edit existing materials to produce something new. The term remix originally applied to music. It rose to prominence late last century during the heyday of hip-hop, the first popular music form to incorporate sampling from existing recordings. Early example, the Sugar Hill Gang samples the bass riff from Chic's Good Times in the 1979 hit Rapper's Delight.
Now what you hear is not a test, I'm rapping to the beat. And me, the groove, and my friends are gonna try to move your feet.
Since then, that same bass line has been sampled dozens of times.
Scene, pulling up with Jodeci, blasting out my 15. I got the good life, no stripe, real nice. And I'm a papa, my son Trey.
Eu sou velho caderninho de telefone, com o nome e o número de monte de mulher. E ele vai ligar.
Skip ahead to the present, and anybody can remix anything, music, video, photos, whatever, and distribute it globally pretty much instantly. You don't need expensive tools, you don't need a distributor, you don't even need skills. Remixing is a folk art, anybody can do it. Yet these techniques, collecting material, combining it, transforming it, are the same ones used at any level of creation. You could even say that everything is a remix.
Okay. So, what does the Sugar Hill Gang have to do with database culture or this course? Well, at the heart of Remix are the databases that makes this arts practice possible. I think Brett Gaylor, who wrote and directed the documentary RIP, a Remix Manifesto, sums this up well at the beginning of that film.
This movie is about a war. A war over ideas. The battleground is the internet. And I take that personally, because I was born at the exact same time as the internet. I was born on a small island off the west coast of Canada. My parents were trying to get away from the world, but like all kids, I wanted the opposite. I wanted to connect back. Luckily, the creators of the internet thought the same way.
This computer would talk to this computer, sending a message first to this computer and forward it on to this computer, thereby acting as a relay.
Millions of computers were connected and evolved into one perfect machine, designed for a single purpose: sharing information. The internet allowed me to connect from my island to the world, to communicate ideas with millions of others, and a media-literate generation emerged, able to download the world's culture and transform it into something different. And we called our new language Remix. Funny things, political things, new things were all uploaded back to the net. The creative process became more important than the product, because consumers were now creators, making the folk art of the future. But the people who owned the culture that we remixed, they represented the past, and they declared war. They didn't see a great library or an information superhighway. They saw a supermarket. and they wanted to get paid. For these people, ideas are intellectual property, locked up until purchase. They use infinite money, corporate lobbies, and lawsuits to protect their property.
As Gaylor points out, remix as an arts practice was made possible by the emergence of internet technology that produced a media literate population that not only consumed media through the internet, but used that media to make their own culture. Now, remix is not new. The practice of using pre-existing media sources to generate a new piece of art has a long history, and today I'd like to explore that history by examining 4 features of contemporary remix arts practices and how these features can be related to earlier practices. The 4 features of remix arts practices are: 1. The generation of new meaning from the use of parts of pre-existing sources. 2. A critique of pre-existing culture. 3. A critique of the concept of authorship. 4. A shift in the economic relationship between consumers and producers. Let's start with the first one. The generation of new meaning from the use of parts of pre-existing sources. Now, this is the most obvious feature of all remix-based arts practices. At the heart of remix is the appropriation of parts of pre-existing sources. In music, these parts are called samples.
What singled out Herc as a DJ was his keen eye for crowd reaction. He noticed that the energy on the dance floor hit a peak during the instrumental breaks in the records, the point when the singing stops and the music carries on. From this simple observation, Herc came up with an idea that would become the basis of hip-hop.
One night, I'm waiting for the record to play out. I said, I wonder if I put that to myself. I said, if they're waiting for this particular break and I have a couple more records that's got the same breakup in it, I wonder how would it be if I put them all together. And I told them, I said, I'm going to try something new tonight. I'm going to call it a merry-go-round.
Herc's merry-go-round meant that instead of playing whole records, he would play just the instrumental breaks, mixing between them to create a continuous dance rhythm.
I started out with James Brown, clap your hand, stomp your feet. That part right there, when the break, boom, I had to come in with bongo rock. Bongo rock was still no vocals in it, and I would go into Baby Huey, the Mexican. And it was like, whoa, I think we got some hit, because people was like, oh, whoa, everybody was like, yeah, I'm feeling this, oh, yeah,
The instrumental breaks on the records became known as the break beats, and Herc's merry-go-round formula of mixing between them provided the blueprint for a new music.
Oh man, Kool Herc was the first person I ever heard that do anything like that, Because I'm used to being in the house with my mother and we put a James Brown record on and just let it play through. Kool Herc would play the break part back and forth, and that really astonished me. I was really impressed when I seen that, something like that, because I'd never seen anything like that before.
By taking the breakbeats from a variety of different songs, DJ Kool Herc was able to create a new dance track that he would play at his parties. Eventually, these breakbeat tracks, assembled from various samples, would form the foundation of contemporary hip-hop, as well as drum and bass, jungle, and electronic dance music.
In 1986, a version of the Amen Brother was included in the Ultimate Breaks and Beats bootleg series on Street Beat Records. The original version of the Amen Brother was at a speed of 45 RPM. In this compilation, the Amen Break appears at 33. In the same year, the EMU SP1200 sampler was released, meaning the birth of sampling was born. The Amen break had a huge influence on music. Let's start with hip-hop. Salt and Pepper were one of the first hip-hop groups to use the sample. In 1986, their track I Desire features the Amen break. Soon, a wealth of hip-hop artists followed suit. Rob Bass and DJ Easy Rock, Tough Crew and Success in Effect all had used the sample by the late 80s. The Amen break is the smooth backbone to the title track of NWA's beloved debut album.
If we shift our focus to other arts practices, we see that many artists had been sampling pre-existing sources well before DJ Kool Herc extended the breakbeat from James Brown's Give It Up or Turn It Loose. In the early 20th century, Cubist painters such as Pablo Picasso experimented with the combination of a variety of materials onto a single canvas. These collages were defined by fractured forms and deconstructed subject matter, and with the combination of these disparate elements giving rise to new meaning. The collage technique would be taken up by the Dadaists and the Surrealist artists that followed the Cubists. And what all of these arts movements had in common was the fact that they were all responding to the traditional role that art had played in society, which brings us to the second feature of remix arts practices, a critique of pre-existing culture. Modern artists like Pablo Picasso are considered modern in the sense that their work challenges or critiques the pre-existing culture of their time. Take, for example, the Dada movement. Dadaism was an avant-garde art movement that actively tried to redefine what constituted art. They were famous for using ready-mades, which were everyday objects that were slightly transformed and presented as legitimate works of art. The most famous example of a ready-made was Marcel Duchamp's The Fountain, a urinal that he flipped upside down, signed, and attempted to exhibit. The Dadaists were explicitly challenging traditional or classical notions of what defines art and the purpose that art serves. Another famous Dada artist was Hannah Höch. Her collages and photomontages made use of sections of ready-made images sourced from magazines and newspapers. This work not only challenged traditional notions of art, but the use of material sourced from popular culture blurred the lines between so-called high art and low art. Using material taken from pre-existing sources also critiques the concept of authorship, which is the third feature of remix arts practices. In remix works, who is the author? In traditional arts practices, the author is central to the work, with the work often thought of as the product of a singular mind. When we think of great works of art, we often think of the author of that art. Think of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, Leonardo's David, Shakespeare's Hamlet. But remix arts practices upends the traditional notion of authorship. Take, for example, Joseph Cornell's 1936 film, Rose Hobart. Cornell, who was a surrealist artist best known for these assemblages, which were intricate glass-fronted boxes filled with a wide variety of seemingly random objects and images, Cornell made this film, Rose Hobart, by recutting a print of the 1931 film, East of Borneo. The 19-minute film features nearly every shot featuring the original film's star, Rose Hobart, rearranged and interspersed with some other footage. The film has a surreal, dreamlike quality, but no discernible narrative. So while Cornell's film is unmistakably a different film from East of Borneo, the concept of authorship comes into question. And this questioning of authorship goes hand in hand with modern art movements such as Dadaism and Surrealism, where concepts related to traditional art, such as authorship, are thrown into doubt. The last feature of remix art practices that we'll look at is the shift in the economic relationship between consumers and producers. The raw material of remix artists is mined from cultural products generated by the arts and entertainment industry. And this shifts the placement of economic value from the source material, the original film, song, photo, etc., to the new work of remix art. By intentionally and actively engaging with cultural material and rejecting passive consumption, remix arts practices are inherently anti-consumerist. And this shifting of economic value creates a tension between the remix artists and the owners of the intellectual property on which their work is built. Okay, so those are the 4 features of remix arts practices. And there are likely other features that you may be able to think of, but for the purpose of today's lecture, these features will help us think through how remix arts practices work and how we can position today's remix arts practices within the context of other practices that have come before. Thanks.